You want to know why we lost the war. The old Kerr veteran's mandibles clicked in irritation as he slowly sipped his drink. I'll tell you why we lost. We never had a real chance against those insane primates. The young reporter leaned forward, her antennae twitching with curiosity. She had heard whispers about the legendary human-Kthur war, but true first-hand stories were rare. Most soldiers chose to forget it. But surely the Empire had military superiority, she began. Military superiority. The veteran chuckled, a rough, clicking noise. Let me explain something about humans and war. You think you understand violence. You believe you understand battle. But you don't. He took another slow sip, his large compound eyes catching the dim light of the spaceport bar. Here's what you need to understand about humans. They turned war into an art form long before they ever left their home planet. While we were perfecting plasma weapons and energy shields, do you know what they were doing? Finding more and more creative ways to destroy each other with sharpened metal and carefully made explosives. But that sounds so primitive, the journalist objected. Primitive. He slammed his drink on the table. Let me tell you something about primitive. During our first fight against human forces, we used the best battle formations, perfect geometric shapes designed by our smartest military AIs. You know what the humans did. He leaned in closer. They looked at our perfect formations and laughed. Then they started throwing rocks at us. Not just any rocks, tungsten rods dropped from space. Do you know what happens when you release a telephone pole-sized metal rod from orbit? He didn't wait for an answer. They called them rods from God. Pure kinetic destruction. No radiation. No fancy energy patterns to scan. Just unstoppable death from above. The journalist's antennae lowered slowly. Our superior numbers. The veteran let out another rough, clicking laugh. Oh, that's the best part. We believed the same thing. We outnumbered them 10-1. But do you know what humans are really good at? Fighting when they're outnumbered. They've built an entire mythology around it. Think about Thermopylae. They turned being outmatched into a source of pride. While we were creating military strategies based on pure logic and precision, they were inventing things called video games, complex simulations of battle that became more advanced over time. By the time we faced them, even their civilians had spent more hours thinking about combat tactics than our best strategists. But those are just simulations, the journalist objected. Surely real combat is exactly what they've been training for their whole lives. The veteran cut her off. Every human child grows up playing war-themed games. Capture the flag, paintball, laser tag. They turned warfare into play. And that's not even the scariest part. He leaned in, lowering his voice. The most terrifying thing is their imagination. We believed we had mastered warfare, perfected formations, ideal weapon systems, precise risk analysis. But humans look at the battlefield and see potential. Unpredictable, dangerous potential. What do you mean? The journalist asked. During the Battle of Ima Centauri, we had them trapped. Better numbers, better positions, stronger weapons. According to all tactical logic, they were finished. You know what they did. They deliberately overloaded their own antimatter reactor containment units, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse. It destroyed their systems, and ours. Then, while both fleets were dead in space, they launched boarding teams using simple chemical rockets. The veteran shuddered. Do you know what it feels like to be inside one of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, surrounded by cutting-edge tech, and watch humans in clunky mechanical suits slice through your hull with thermal lances? Not with plasma cutters. Not with energy beams. Just extremely hot metal. And the worst part, they were singing while doing it. Singing some old war song. Blood upon the risers, I think. Something about parachutes failing. They have songs about their soldiers dying horribly. And they sing them to raise morale. What kind of species does that? The journalist's mandibles twitched uneasily. Their technological limitations. The veteran shook his head. See, that's where everyone misunderstood. We thought their outdated technology was a weakness. But humans don't think about technology like we do. To them, technology is just a tool, one of many. They'll use plasma rifles right alongside old-fashioned ballistic weapons. They'll run quantum computers next to mechanical analog systems. It doesn't matter how advanced it is. If it works, they use it. He spread his arms wide as if to make the point even clearer. You want to know what really makes that mindset obvious? Their language. There's this saying they have. There's more than one way to skin a cat. The first time I heard it, I had to ask what it meant. Turns out it's just an idiom for solving problems in different ways. But think about that. They have a common phrase about removing the hide from an animal using multiple methods. That's the kind of species we were fighting. But we had better ships, better weapons, the journalist began. Better ships. He gave a dry chuckle. Let me tell you about human ships. While we were designing beautiful balanced vessels with flawless symmetry and perfect energy flow, humans were basically bolting engines onto massive metal blocks. Their ships weren't graceful. They were aggressive, overbuilt machines designed to take massive damage and keep fighting. They didn't even bother with proper energy shielding on their smaller crafts. They just slapped on layers and layers of thick armor and said, "Good enough." He took another long drink. And their weapons. Sure, we had more advanced energy weapons. But do you know what humans brought to the battlefield? Everything. Literally everything. Energy weapons, bullet-based weapons, high-speed kinetic projectiles, chemical weapons, biological weapons. If it could hurt you, they found a way to turn it into a weapon. They even weaponized information, mimetic warfare, psychological manipulation. They didn't just want to beat us in combat. They wanted to crush our spirit. They studied our culture, our minds, our society. Then they used what they learned against us. Spreading rumors, myths, lies. They planted doubt, fear, and confusion in our ranks. By the end of the war, we had soldiers surrendering just because they'd heard humans could smell fear, and that you'd die quicker if you didn't fight back. The journalist's antennae twitched rapidly. But that's absurd. Of course it was absurd, the veteran said calmly. But that's the thing about humans and warfare. They don't care if something is absurd. They only care if it works. If something works, they'll use it, no matter how strange or old-fashioned it seems. He emptied his glass. But you want to know the real reason we lost. The most important, undeniable reason why humans are unbeatable in war. Why? The journalist asked softly. Because they enjoy it. Not the killing. Not the death. Well, some of them do, and those ones are truly terrifying. But most of them, they enjoy the challenge, the problem-solving, the strategy, the tactics. To them, war is like a game, a puzzle to be figured out. And they're exceptionally good at solving puzzles. He signaled the bartender for another drink. You know what they did after we surrendered? They invited our top surviving officers to something called a paintball tournament. Said it would help with post-war diplomacy. So there we were, the highest-ranking survivors of our military, being pelted with colored paintballs by laughing humans who treated the whole event like a party game. That's disturbing, the journalist said quietly. Disturbing doesn't even begin to describe it. Do you know what their civilians were doing during the war? They were building miniature models of our ships and vehicles, for fun. Creating simulated battles in their video games. Writing stories about alternate outcomes of the war. Imagining different endings. Just to explore all the what-ifs. Their entire society is built around thinking about, analyzing, and even enjoying conflict. He leaned back, his compound eyes catching the starlight from the space station's large viewport. So you want to know why we lost? Because we were fighting soldiers. And they were fighting warriors. We fought with science. They fought with art. We fought because we had to. They fought because they'd spent their whole existence waiting for the chance to prove themselves against an alien foe. The journalist sat quietly for a long time, absorbing every word. Finally she asked, "Do you think they'll ever change? Become more civilized?" The veteran let out a dry, amused chitter. Civilized. They are civilized. And that's what makes them so dangerous. They've kept their warrior nature while building an advanced, refined society. They have ballet dancers who also train in martial arts. Scientists who play strategy games for fun. Politicians who go hunting in their free time. Their culture is built around the belief that you can be both cultured and deadly. He pointed toward a group of humans at the far end of the bar, cheerfully arm wrestling, laughing and betting drinks. Look at them now. Just having fun. Friendly competition. But I've seen what happens when you push them too far, when you threaten their people, their worlds, or their way of life. They stop being civilized. The veteran gave a low, bitter laugh. Sure, until they're pushed. Then you see why every species that's ever fought them has either surrendered or been wiped out. Why is that? The journalist asked quietly. Because humans don't just practice war. They don't just study it. They don't just enjoy it. They go beyond it. They turn violence into art, conflict into dance, and battle into a symphony. They are the gods of war, and the rest of us. We're still struggling with simple equations, while they're composing grand operas of destruction. He finished his drink and stood, mandibles clicking softly. So next time someone tells you that humans are primitive because they still use projectile weapons, or backwards because they keep standing armies, or uncivilized because they enjoy combat sports, remember this conversation. Remember that every outdated piece of technology they still use is something they found a purpose for, something our advanced civilizations never thought of. Remember that their so-called outdated military traditions have been sharpened through thousands of years of endless warfare. And remember that their love for competition, the very thing many species mock, is what constantly drives them to innovate and evolve. He walked toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and one more thing, if you ever find yourself in a fight with a human. He turned slightly, his voice calm but serious. Surrender immediately. Because if you don't, they'll take whatever you're using, figure out how it works, make it better, and use it against you. And they'll probably be humming a happy tune while they do it. With that, he gave one last low chitter and disappeared into the station's corridor, leaving the young journalist sitting in silence, alone with the chilling truth. She glanced toward the humans still gathered at the far end of the bar. They were now singing something about a grand old Duke of York who had 10,000 men. She decided she didn't want to know how the rest of that song ended. Some questions, she realized, were better left unanswered. Just as she was preparing to leave, one of the humans from the singing group approached the bar and sat beside her. He wore what appeared to be a formal military uniform, though to her Kacker senses, the colorful medals and ribbons looked overly decorative, almost ridiculous. "Couldn't help but overhear some of that conversation," he said casually, ordering something called a whiskey. "Your friend got a few things right," he continued, sipping his drink, "but he missed the best parts." Her professional curiosity flared again. Best parts? The human grinned, and she noticed with mild concern how humans bared their teeth when amused, a gesture that would signal danger in most intelligent species. "Oh yeah," he said. "See, your veteran friend. He only saw us during wartime. That's like watching the ending of a play without seeing the full performance. Any of the rehearsals." The human settled onto the bar stool, and the journalist found herself instinctively leaning back, unsettled by his relaxed self-assurance. "Did you fight in the war?" she asked. "Me? Nah," he replied with a smile. "I was just a kid back then. But I've studied it. We all have. It's part of our basic education now. How not to start an interstellar war 101. He laughed softly. Though honestly, it should be called how to end one really fast if someone else starts it. He motioned toward the stars glittering beyond the viewport. When most species look out there, they see resources, territory, strategic points. You know what humans see. Every science fiction story we've ever written, every space battle we imagined, every desperate last stand, clever plan, and heroic sacrifice we ever dreamed up. His expression grew serious. But do you want to know the real truth? The thing that actually makes us dangerous? "What's that?" she asked. "We don't want to fight. We prepare for war. Constantly, obsessively, but our greatest heroes are the ones who prevent it. The commanders who win without bloodshed. The diplomats who stop wars before they begin. The leaders who keep peace." He finished his drink and gently set the glass down. "That's what truly makes us the gods of war. Not just that we've mastered it, but that we understand it well enough to know when not to use it. Your veteran friend was right. We've turned warfare into art. But like any true artist, we know our greatest work sometimes comes from choosing not to create at all." He stood up and adjusted his decorated uniform. "That's why we're here now. Drinking together in a quiet bar, not firing weapons in orbit. Because as skilled as we are at war, we're even better at finding reasons not to fight." He smiled again, And this time the journalist didn't flinch at the sight of his exposed teeth. "Just remember," he said with a wink, "the only thing humans love more than a good fight is a good reason not to have one." With that, he turned and walked back to his group, who were now loudly attempting to sing something about 99 bottles of beer on the wall. The journalist looked down at her notes, then up at the stars, and finally she understood. Humans weren't feared as the gods of war because they were the best at fighting. They were feared because they were the best at understanding why not to. She had her story, though somehow she knew it wasn't the one she had originally set out to write. Behind her, the humans kept laughing, singing, and telling stories. Gods of war choosing peace. The humans had started singing again. This time, something about a buffalo soldier in the heart of America. The journalist decided silently that some songs, like some species, were best appreciated from a safe distance, preferably behind several layers of reinforced armor, just to be cautious. As she sat quietly, reflecting on the human officer's words, she noticed something strange. The mood in the bar had shifted. The usual background noise had faded. The singing had stopped. She turned her head, curious, and found the entire group of humans staring intently at the large news screen above the bar. Breaking news. Pirates had attacked a civilian transport near the Carina Nebula. But not just any transport, a refugee ship. One carrying children from the war-torn Riel sector. The change in the humans was instant. The cheerful expressions vanished. Their relaxed postures stiffened. The friendly chatter fell into silence. Their eyes were cold now, focused, hardened. And for the first time, the journalist felt a deep, instinctive chill creep down her thorax. This, she realized, this was what the Kerr veteran had tried to warn her about. A new human approached her table. A woman this time, dressed in civilian clothing, but carrying herself with clear military discipline. Without asking, she sat down across from the journalist. "You want to know why we're really called the gods of war?" the woman asked, her voice calm but intense. "Watch what happens next." "What do you mean?" the journalist asked. The woman nodded toward the screen. "Those pirates, they just made the biggest mistake of their lives." "Why?" "Because they broke one of humanity's deepest rules. You have rules for warfare." The woman gave a short laugh, not warm like before, but sharp, cold. It reminded the journalist of the sound ice makes as it cracks under pressure. "We have rules for everything. Codes of conduct, laws of war, Geneva Conventions, rules of engagement." She paused, eyes still locked on the screen. "But some rules. Some are written straight into our DNA." The journalist watched the humans in the bar come to life again, not with laughter or noise, but with sharp, quiet coordination. They were making calls, sending encrypted messages, sharing intel, moving with a speed and unity that no longer resembled a group of strangers in a bar. They were a machine, awakened and focused. The woman leaned in slightly. "See, most species think we're dangerous because we're skilled at combat. But that's not what makes us truly dangerous." "What does?" Her voice lowered. "We have lines that are never meant to be crossed." She tilted her head toward the screen. "And when someone crosses those lines..." A cold, knowing smile touched her lips. And at that moment, the journalist finally understood why some species whispered about humans in hushed tones. Some species considered human smiles to be a threat display, a warning, not a comfort. "The veteran you spoke to," the woman continued. "He saw us during a regular war. The officer. He knows our history, our training, our potential. She leaned in slightly. But neither of them showed you what happens when humanity gets truly angry. On the screen, new reports started pouring in. Multiple naval fleets were changing course toward the Kina Nebula. Not just human ships. Vessels from every major power in the sector were moving. The journalist's antennae twitched in surprise. How? Why? Alliances, the woman replied calmly. That's another thing we're good at. When humanity goes to war, we don't just bring weapons, she said. We bring friends. Allies. Partners. She nodded toward the screen again. We learned a long time ago that the strongest warrior isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one with the most people willing to stand beside them. The journalist's eyes widened as she read the screen. Every nation that had signed the Terran Accords was mobilizing. Are they responding because they have to? She asked. The woman shook her head. No, they're doing it because they want to. Because they know, if they ever need help, humanity will remember who stood with us. Us. Then the journalist asked. But it's just pirates. The woman's expression changed. Darkened. They attack children, refugees, the helpless, the innocent. She turned fully toward the screen now. Do you know what that means in human terms? The journalist shook her head again. It means the rules just changed. Her voice was quiet but intense. In a normal war, we follow restrictions, protocols, ethics. But when someone targets children, she pointed toward the screen again, where even more ships were appearing, the fleet growing rapidly. That's when you see why we're called the gods of war. At that moment, the same human officer from earlier approached their table. Task forces are forming, he reported. We're seeing coordinated fleets in 3 other sectors. Someone's been tracking these pirates for a while. The woman didn't even look surprised. Of course they have, she said. We never forgot. Those words stirred something in the journalist's mind. Her professional instincts flared. Never forgot what? She asked. The 2 humans exchanged a glance. The officer spoke first. 3 years ago, these same pirates hit another refugee ship. We couldn't prove it was them, but we knew. So we waited, the woman added. Watched. Collected intel. Built networks. Made allies. And now? The journalist asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman's smile returned. Calm, cold, terrifying. Now they've given us a reason, an excuse, a justification. And that, she said, is when humans are at their most dangerous, when we act with full moral authority. On the screen, the first battle reports were coming in. The journalist stared in awe. Ships from a dozen species moved together with incredible precision, blocking escape routes, isolating pirate vessels, performing maneuvers that should have been impossible for such a mixed fleet. How are they working together so smoothly? She asked aloud. The officer smiled. Because we trained them. And we trained them well. Why humanity is truly feared. Gods of war. She began singing again. Something about a buffalo soldier in the heart of America. The journalist decided that, like some dangerous creatures, certain human songs were best appreciated from a safe distance. Ideally behind several layers of reinforced armor, just to be sure. As the journalist tried to process the human officer's words, she noticed a strange shift in the bar's atmosphere. The background noise had changed. The singing had stopped. She turned to see what had caused the silence, and saw the group of humans now staring intently at a news broadcast on the large vid screen. Breaking news. Pirates had attacked a civilian transport near the Carina Nebula. But it wasn't just any ship. It was carrying refugee children from the war-ravaged Riel sector. The change in the humans was sudden and intense. Their smiles disappeared. The relaxed postures, the casual jokes, all gone. Their faces turned cold and serious. A chill ran down the journalist's spine. This, she finally realized, was what the veteran had tried to warn her about. A new human approached her table, this time a woman, dressed in civilian clothes but moving with unmistakable military precision. Without asking, she sat down. "You want to know why we're really called the gods of war?" she asked in a calm but firm tone. "Watch what happens next." "What do you mean?" the journalist asked. "Those pirates just made the worst mistake of their lives," the woman replied. "They broke one of humanity's unspoken laws." "You have rules for war?" the journalist asked, surprised. The woman let out a cold laugh. It wasn't like the cheerful laughter she'd heard earlier. It reminded the journalist of ice cracking under pressure. "We have rules for everything. Codes of conduct, laws of war, Geneva Conventions, rules of engagement. But some rules," she nodded at the screen, "some rules are written into our DNA." The journalist watched as the humans in the bar began making calls, sending messages, and organizing with a level of speed and coordination that was shocking, especially given how relaxed they'd been moments ago. "Most species think we're dangerous because we're good at fighting," the woman continued. "But that's not it. We're dangerous because we have lines that should never be crossed. And when someone crosses them," she smiled. The journalist instantly understood why some species found human smiles threatening. "The veteran you talked to earlier. He saw us during a conventional war," the woman explained. "He knows our history, our training, our capability. But even he didn't show you what happens when humans get truly angry." On the screen, new updates appeared. Multiple Navy vessels were rerouting toward the Carina Nebula, not just human ships, but fleets from all major powers in the region. The journalist's antennae twitched in surprise. "Alliances," the woman said. "Another thing we're good at. When humanity goes to war, we don't go alone. We bring allies, partners, and friends. Because long ago, we learned that the strongest warrior isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one with the most people standing beside them." She pointed to the screen. "Right now, every nation that signed the Terran Accords is moving. Not because they're forced to, but because they know that if they ever need help, humanity will remember who stood with us." "But they're just pirates," the journalist said. The woman's expression turned serious. "They attack children, refugees, the defenseless. Do you know what that means to humans?" The journalist shook her head. "It means the rules have changed. When we fight a regular war, we follow rules. We show restraint. We value ethics. But when someone targets innocent lives," she gestured toward the screen, where even more ships were appearing, "that's when you see why we're feared." The human officer from earlier joined them. "Task forces are in motion. Similar groups are forming in 3 other sectors. Someone's been tracking these pirates for a while." "Of course," the woman replied. "We never forgot." The journalist leaned forward. "Never forgot what?" The two humans shared a glance. The officer answered first. 3 years ago, these same pirates hit another refugee ship. We couldn't prove it, but we knew. So we waited. Collected intelligence. Built networks. Made friends. And now?" the journalist asked. "Now," the woman said with an unsettlingly calm smile. They've given us a reason. And that's when humans become the most dangerous, when we act with full moral clarity. On the screen, the first combat updates appeared. The journalist watched in awe as ships from a dozen different species worked in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes, surrounding pirate ships, and performing military maneuvers that seemed impossible for such a diverse group. How are they working together so smoothly? The journalist asked. Because we trained them, the officer said proudly. After the last war, we shared what we knew. Our tactics, our experience, our strategies. Not everything, of course. We're not foolish. But enough to make them strong. Because we realized the only thing better than being skilled at war is having allies who are skilled at war too. And who trust you, the woman added. Trust is a weapon more powerful than any battleship. The journalist continued watching as the operation unfolded with perfect precision. Within hours, the pirates were trapped. The refugee ship was safe. Wait, the journalist said. They're offering the pirates a chance to surrender? Of course, the woman said. That's the first rule of human warfare. Always offer surrender. Always give them a way out. Because the goal isn't to destroy your enemy. It's not. No, the officer replied. The goal is to make sure they never want to fight you again. And sometimes the best way to do that is to show mercy when you have every right not to. The journalist watched as most of the pirates surrendered. A few tried to flee. Few chose to fight. None succeeded. And that, the woman said, rising from her seat, is why we're called the gods of war. Not because we're the strongest. Not because we're the most advanced. Not because we're the most brutal. But because we understand what true strength is. Choosing which battles to fight and how to win them in a way that prevents more wars. She adjusted her civilian jacket, and the journalist suddenly realized what had felt strange about her. Her clothes were civilian, but her presence, her composure, her authority, screamed admiral. One last lesson about humans and warfare, the admiral said. We're not just good at fighting wars. We're good at ending them. Sometimes with force. Sometimes with mercy. Often with both. But always with purpose. The officer beside her nodded. The pirates thought they could get away with it because they misunderstood us. They thought our laughter and our games meant we weren't serious about war. They forgot, the admiral concluded, that gods can be both kind and terrifying. And humanity. We've had a lot of practice being both. The journalist looked back at the screen. The United Fleet was now escorting the captured pirates to the nearest starbase. Medical ships from 3 different species were attending to the refugee children. And once again, humanity had shown why they were called the gods of war. Not through superior weapons or sheer numbers or even advanced strategies, but through unity, mercy, memory, and purpose. Through something far more powerful, the ability to unite others for a shared cause, to fight with both rage and control, and to turn possible enemies into lasting allies. The humans in the bar had started singing again, but this time it felt different. This time their voices carried something older, deeper, more meaningful. A song about amazing grace and how sweet the sound truly was. The journalist had heard humans sing several times that night, but this was the first time she understood why they sang. Sometimes even gods need to remind themselves of mercy. The pirate attack had attracted quite a crowd to the station's bar. The journalist noticed a group of younger aliens, students based on their clothing and markings, gathering around an elderly human dressed in a ceremonial uniform. Unlike the active-duty military personnel, His uniform was decorated with old medals and faded symbols, signs of battles long past. "Is it true?" one of the students asked. "About the great memorial?" The old human's eyes wrinkled with a quiet smile. "Ah, you're asking about how we remember our wars." The journalist moved a little closer, her datapad ready. This was a part of human warfare she hadn't yet explored. How they honored their martial history. "On Earth," the old veteran began, "there's a wall. A simple thing, really. Black stone, polished until it reflects like a mirror. On it are names, just names. Tens of thousands of them." He looked out into the distance as he continued. "People visit to touch the names, to make paper rubbings, to leave behind flowers, medals, and handwritten letters." "But why?" a young sentinel asked. "Why remember the dead like that?" "Because every name has a story," the old man replied. "Each and every one. We don't just remember our victories. We also remember our losses, our sacrifices, and yes, even our mistakes. That's something else that makes us different." The admiral from earlier entered quietly and took a seat nearby. The old veteran gave her a respectful nod before continuing. "Most species build statues to celebrate their victories. Generals cast in stone, monuments to famous battles. We do that too," he said with a pause, taking a small sip from his drink. "But we also build memorials to remember our failures, our defeats. The cost of war itself." "But why?" another student asked softly. "Why remember the defeats?" "Because that's how you learn," the admiral said, her voice steady. "That's how you make sure those mistakes don't happen again." The old veteran nodded. "Every name on that wall is a lesson. Written in blood." The old man nodded slowly. "We have a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But for humans, remembering isn't just about facts and dates. It's about stories, emotions, and connections." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal object on a chain. "This belonged to my grandfather. He fought in what we called World War II. Just one of millions. When I was a child, he didn't talk to me about the victories. He told me about the friends he lost, the horrors he witnessed, the true cost of war." "That seems counterproductive," one of the students commented. "Wouldn't that discourage people from becoming warriors?" The admiral chuckled softly. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it actually does the opposite. When humans go to war, we don't just carry weapons. We carry memories, stories, lessons that were learned through blood and fire. Every human warrior," the old veteran continued, "carries the burden of those who came before them, not just their victories but their sacrifices, their losses, their pain. And that weight, it makes us better warriors because we understand what war truly costs." The journalist's antenna twitched with curiosity. "Is that why humans approach war so differently than other species?" "Partly," the admiral replied. "Most species see war as a tool, a necessary method to achieve something. But we see it as an ongoing story. Every battle, every conflict, every war, they're all chapters in a book. A book that began when the first human picked up a rock to protect their tribe. And we're still writing that story," the veteran added. "Still adding chapters. Still learning. Still remembering." One of the students pointed toward the news feed, which was still showing reports from the pirate attack. "Is that why everyone responded so quickly? Because of those memories?" "Exactly," the admiral said. "When we saw that refugee ship under attack, We didn't just see a news event. We saw every refugee ship that's ever been attacked. Every innocent life ever harmed. Every time someone tried to prey on the weak and walk away untouched. We remember, the veteran said quietly. We always remember, the admiral continued. But it's more than that. We also remember every moment when someone stood up to protect the innocent. Every time different species united for a shared purpose. Every moment when mercy was chosen, even though revenge would have been easier. The veteran held up his grandfather's dog tags. These remind me of something important about human warfare. We don't fight because we love war. We fight because we remember what happens when good people do nothing. And that, the admiral added, is why we train so hard, why we prepare so carefully, why we form alliances and share knowledge. Because we remember every time we were unprepared, every moment we were too late, every failure to protect those who needed help. The journalist glanced down at her notes, then looked back at the group. So humans are considered gods of war not just because of how you fight, but because of how you remember. Exactly, the veteran finished. It's about how we learn. How we carry the weight of every war, every defeat, every triumph, and every sacrifice. The admiral stood up, adjusting her civilian clothes. That's why those pirates never had a chance. Not just because we had stronger forces or better coordination, but because every human who responded carried the memory of all the times someone tried to harm the innocent. And they also remembered the mercy shown to survivors. One of the students raised a hand. So, it's also because you remember. Yes, the veteran replied. We remember what happens when victory turns into revenge. When justice becomes cruelty. We remember because we must. If we forget, we risk becoming the very thing we fight against. On the newsfeed, the last of the pirate ships was being escorted to the starbase. The refugee vessel had docked safely, its passengers now being cared for by a team of medical workers from many different species. So you see, the veteran said quietly, being gods of war isn't about being the best at fighting. It's about being the best at remembering why we fight, when to fight, and most importantly, when not to. And when we do fight, the admiral added, we carry with us every lesson, every story, every sacrifice from the past. That's what makes us better warriors. Not strength, speed, or skill, but understanding the real price of war. And that understanding, the veteran concluded, makes us more fearsome in battle, but also more compassionate in victory. The students sat in thoughtful silence. The journalist glanced down at her notes and realized she now had enough content for not just a single article, but an entire series. Behind them, the humans in the bar had begun singing again. But this time, it was a slower, more somber song, one about poppies growing in fields where soldiers had fallen long ago. The journalist finally understood. Humans weren't called gods of war simply because of how they fought. They were gods of war because they never forgot why they fought, or what it had cost.